But we begin tonight with a new battleground in the effort to stymie the president's push to transform the federal bureaucracy and expand executive power. And by the president, I think I mean Donald Trump, but it could easily mean Elon Musk, too, since he seems to be acting as Trump's co-commander-in-chief. And after being Trump's biggest campaign donor, the world's richest billionaire has his staff rifling through nearly every federal agency, cutting off funding to basically whatever they want to, and particularly targeting the most vulnerable and, frankly, the poorest Americans. The fight over whether that is actually legal is playing out in the federal courts right now, where district judges are releasing a flurry of orders on some of Trump's most controversial executive orders, as well as trying to keep Elon Musk and his junior DOGE staffers from being able to access sensitive government systems like the Treasury Department's payment system, basically the system that pays all of America's bills, or at least it did until the DOGE kids came along. The pushback is not sitting well with the co-presidents who held court in the Oval Office today together alongside Elon's toddler. And weirdly, it was Musk doing most of the talking. Perhaps he should have been the one sitting behind the Resolute desk. When he did get a word in edgewise, Trump did put the judges on notice with this ominous remark.
And it seems hard to believe that judges want to try and stop us from looking for corruption, especially when we found hundreds of millions of dollars worth, much more than that, in just a short period of time. We want to weed out the corruption, and it seems hard to believe that a judge could say, we don't want you to do that. Well, so maybe we have to look at the judges, because that's a very serious, I think it's a very serious violation.
Weirdly, no one asked for specifics on that supposed corruption they found. Adding to the pushback from the courts, just this morning, a federal judge ordered Trump's federal health agencies to restore web pages that have been changed or taken down to comply with Trump's executive order regarding so-called gender ideology. U.S. District Judge John Bates, a George W. Bush appointee, said the changes to the web pages appeared to harm some doctors' ability to treat patients, and was done without any public rationale, recourse, or ability to challenge the decisions, despite laws and regulations that typically require them. But when it comes to Trump and his administration following the law, we've seen how they've decided to pick and choose which ones they want to follow. Of course, this shouldn't be all that surprising. This is what happens when you put an adjudicated criminal in charge of your government. Not only does he not feel bound by the law, he clearly feels empowered to defy the courts and dare them to react. One of his first acts as president was to release nearly 1,500 fellow convicted criminals, the January 6 insurrectionists, including the hundreds who violently attacked law enforcement simply because they were his allies. So to Trump, that means they're patriots. Right now, he's allowing Musk and Musk's teenage band of DOGE programmers free rein to rifle through Americans' data to do who knows what with it. The potential theft of all of our personal data is now on the table for both scammers and maybe even foreign adversaries. Who knows? And thanks to Trump, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau will no longer be there to help Americans avoid being ripped off. All of this is happening as those around Trump, like Vice President J.D. Vance, are openly saying that the courts actually have no right to act as a check and balance on Trump, even though the Constitution says that they do. And don't expect any pushback from the other co-equal branch of government, as House Speaker Mike Johnson says he's on board with Vance's assessment.
I will say I agree wholeheartedly with Vice President J.D. Vance, my friend, because he's right. What they're doing in the executive branch, I've been asked so many times, aren't you uncomfortable with this? No, I'm not. I think the courts should take a step back and allow these processes to play out. What we're doing is good and right for the American people.
Now, the we's doing a lot of work there. In the meantime, we are getting a firsthand look at what justice looks like in the second Trump term. Yesterday, the Justice Department ordered federal prosecutors to drop the bribery and fraud charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams, a move one federal law enforcement official called horrific and just transparent corruption. In a striking two-page memo, Acting Deputy Attorney General Emile Beauvais said the Justice Department reached the decision not based on the strength of the evidence, but rather they think the indictment had been brought too close to Adams' reelection campaign. and has restricted the mayor's ability to, quote, devote full attention and resources to illegal immigration and violent crime. Beauvais also suggested, without evidence, that the charges were politically motivated, writing, "It cannot be ignored that Mayor Adams criticized the prior administration's immigration policies before the charges were filed." But it's not just Adams. Trump also signed a full pardon for Rod Blagojevich, the former Illinois governor and Celebrity Apprentice contestant, who in 2011 was convicted of corruption for attempting to sell the Senate seat vacated by Barack Obama when he became president. Today, we learned that Blagojevich is reportedly, and I promise you, I'm not making this up, under consideration to be the next U.S. ambassador to Serbia, according to a source with knowledge of the matter, because of course. Add to that, Trump signing an executive order directing the DOJ to pause prosecutions of Americans accused of bribing foreign governments, and also ousting the head of the Office of Government Ethics. Because, who needs ethics when you're creating a breeding ground for corruption, fraud, and scams on the American people? Anybody want to buy a Trump meme coin or use X Twitter to send money like Cash App or PayPal? Raise your hands. I guess we should expect nothing less from the first convicted felon president. The question is, what, if anything, can we do about it? Joining me now is Sherrilyn Ifill, Vernon Jordan Chair in Civil Rights at Howard University and former President and Director Counsel for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Sherrilyn, it is always good to see you. I want to go back and get you to react to the Speaker of the House saying, no, this is fine. I have no problem with Donald Trump's top campaign donor exercising my authority as a member of Congress and all of Congress's authority.
Oh, good evening, Joy. Listen, everyone knows, and certainly the Republicans know, what are the magic words that you have to say in order not to incite Trump's ire. And those are the words that Mike Johnson is saying. Before the clip that you showed, the reporters asked him the question and said, "You are a constitutional law expert, Mr. Johnson." And even the man behind Mr. Johnson laughed a bit. He's not talking like a lawyer. He's saying what he feels. And you heard the language he used. What we're doing is good and right. He has a kind of evangelical tone. He's not talking about whether it's legal. He's not talking about whether they are following the procedures that are required by law. He's not talking about whether separation of powers is being recognized and protected. And frankly, for the leader of the House of Representatives to sanction and support essentially handing over the power of the United States Congress, an independent branch of government, to the executive branch is shocking. It's disqualifying and would be in any other time. So when we hear Mike Johnson saying that in that tone where he's trying to calm everything down, we should recognize that he's abdicating his responsibility as the Speaker of the House to protect the power of that House. That's nonpartisan. That's not because he's a Republican or a Democrat, but because his allegiance should be to the United States Congress. And what he showed there is that his allegiance is to whatever are the whims of this United States president, not to the Congress to which he has been elected as leader.
I will note that J.D. Vance is president of the Senate as vice president and has a Yale law degree and agreed and concurred also with the law breaking of the president. I want to go to some of just the corruption piece. Let's just zero in on Eric Adams for a moment. Eric Adams, the DOJ is dropping the charges. They literally said in order for the charges against Adams to be dismissed, and the dismissal is without prejudice, the official said, meaning the charges could be refiled in the future, which essentially means that Donald Trump now owns Eric Adams because those charges could come at him anytime. I will add to that this piece of news from Pix 11, local news outlet in New York. Mayor Adams instructed his top officials in a very tense meeting not to criticize Donald Trump. If they have any issues with the president, keep it to themselves. This man is now the property, in a sense, of Donald Trump. That is the most open and blatant corruption I can imagine.
Well, you remember that, word on the street was that Mayor Adams wanted a pardon from the president. He did not get a pardon. What he got was an offer to remove the heat. And we all understood that he was kind of looking for a pardon by the way in which he was co-signing some of Trump's commentary about immigration. We understood that. Mm-hmm. But what happened is something even more chilling. This dismissal without prejudice essentially means, and they said they'll review it again after November, after the election. And essentially what that means is that if Mayor Adams steps out of line in accordance with how Trump or Pam Bondi might see it, the Attorney General, they can re-up this case at any moment. You can't help but be chilled by that. You can't help but be compromised in what you might say or what you might do or policies you might undertake. I'm fully expecting Mayor Adams to be at President Trump's Black History Month commemoration next week. I expect that he will be called upon on various occasions to shore up the policies of President Trump. But the issue here is that this is someone elected to represent the people of New York, what the people of New York need and what's best for them. And this is clearly a way in which President Trump and Pam Bondi have some control over him, and that we can't expect that it will not have some influence on the way he behaves over the next 10 months.